Want to know why? Ask how. Howard, the humongous. In the Trump versus Clinton campaign, the time has come to distinguish between what's just mudslinging and what's for real. Why? Because if the candidates are right about each other, this country is headed for 4 years of really big trouble. On Friday, August 5th, CIA former acting director Michael J. Morell endorsed Hillary Clinton in an op-ed in the New York Times. The CIA's Morell called Donald Trump, quote, a threat to our national security, close quote. He explained that intelligence operatives look for weaknesses in their fellow human beings and then exploit them. There's a former KGB intelligence operative named Vladimir Putin, and Putin saw that Trump falls head over heels for flattery. Putin flattered the Donald, and in former acting CIA Director Morell's words, Putin recruited Mr. Trump as an unwitting agent, an agent of the Russian Federation. But another extreme accusation came on August 5th from, of all people, the BBC. The BBC reported that Donald Trump has said that the election process is rigged by the Clinton machine, the same way it was rigged against Bernie Sanders, says Trump. Then the BBC gets to the meat. It lets the cat out of the bag. The BBC reports that, quote, in a podcast last week, longtime Trump advisor Roger Stone, who just happens to be the chief political advisor to Donald Trump, said that if the election results in November don't match opinion polls, the Republican nominee should challenge the validity of the election, and Stone warned that the unrest could end in, quote, a bloodbath. If there's voter fraud, this election will be illegitimate, Stone said. The election of the winner will be illegitimate. We will have a constitutional crisis, widespread civil disobedience, and the government will no longer be the government. In other words, if Trump is not elected president, there may well be a bloody revolution. Is this just rhetoric? Or is this really what the Trump campaign wants if the Donald does not win this election? To give you a deeper sense of what's going on here, here's the gist of what former CIA acting director Michael J. Morell wrote on Friday, August 5th, in his op-ed piece in the New York Times. Morell pointed out that he has served under 3 Republican presidents and 3 Democratic presidents, and that he was with Barack Obama when Osama bin Laden was killed in 2011. Morell explains, that he is an independent. Sometimes he votes Democrat, sometimes he votes Republican. And Morell points out he's had long experience serving with Hillary Clinton. Then says Morell about Clinton, quote, paper, I hate paper. Quote, I trust she will deliver on the most important duty of a president, keeping our nation safe. Second, Donald J. Trump is not only unqualified for the job, but he may well pose a threat to our national security. I found Hillary to be prepared, detail-oriented, thoughtful, inquisitive, and willing to change her mind if presented with a compelling argument. She understands that diplomacy can be effective only if the country is perceived as willing and able to use force if necessary. I never saw her bring politics into the Situation Room. In fact, I saw the opposite. When some wanted to delay the bin Laden raid by 1 day because the White House Correspondents' Dinner might be disrupted, she said, screw the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Merrill describes the character defects that he feels disqualify Donald Trump from ever gaining access to the nuclear codes in the nuclear football, to the button. Writes Morell, quote, these traits include his obvious need for self-aggrandizement, his overreaction to perceived slights, his tendency to make decisions based on intuition, his refusal to change his views based on new information, his routine carelessness with the facts, his unwillingness to listen to others, and his lack of respect for the rule of law. These traits, says Morell, are already damaging our national security. Already damaging our national security. This is back to Morell's quote. President Vladimir V. Putin of Russia was a career intelligence officer, trained to identify vulnerabilities in an individual and to exploit them. That is exactly what he did early in the primaries. Mr. Putin played upon Mr. Trump's vulnerabilities by complimenting him. What's the result? Says Morell, quote, Mr. Trump has taken policy positions consistent with Russian, not American interests. Mr. Trump has taken policy positions consistent with Russian, not American interests. If you've been watching the news carefully, you've seen this for yourself. Morell goes on to say that Trump has been endorsing Russian espionage against the United States, supporting Russia's annexation of Crimea, and giving a green light to a possible Russian invasion of the Baltic states. In the intelligence business, says Morell, we would say that Mr. Putin had recruited Mr. Trump as an unwitting agent of the Russian Federation. That is a strong statement from a man who knows his stuff much better than I know how to deal with paper. There's one more interesting fact that Morell reveals. He writes, quote, many Muslim Americans play critical roles in protecting our country, including the man whom I cannot identify, who ran the CIA's counterterrorism center for nearly a decade, and who I believe is most responsible for keeping America safe since the September 11 attacks. That's the end of the Morell quotes. On the other hand, Republicans accuse Hillary Clinton of being on the payroll of foreign governments who have bought her services by contributing big to the Clinton Foundation. They accuse her of being an accomplice in the murder of American diplomatic representatives in Benghazi. Republicans accuse Hillary Clinton of lying to the families of the Benghazi victims, of endangering American security with an unsecure server, and of being a nonstop liar who will mire the White House in crime. Are these two sides right about each other? Or is this all wild exaggeration? That's up for you and me to decide, and it's a toughie. But here's one peculiar fact to chew on while you think it over. Paul Manafort is the head of Donald Trump's presidential campaign. He made a curious slip of the tongue on the CBS News on August 5th. Asked if he supports Paul Ryan, which at the moment Donald Trump was not supporting. Donald Trump was not supporting Paul Ryan early Friday. Manafort said, quote, I support Paul Ryan as a speaker, and I know that after next week I'm going to be supporting him for president too. Yes, Trump's campaign head said that I support Paul Ryan as a speaker, and I know that after next week I'm going to be supporting him for president too. Does that slip of the tongue give a clue to what's really on Manafort's mind? That he'd rather be handling the presidential campaign of Paul Ryan than the campaign of Donald J. Trump. This is Howard the Humongous, speaking to you from the future, that it is really, more than ever, your job and my job to make. Or, want to know why? Ask how. And now, for that infamous, slimy, sleazy little I think I've got it off button.